You are listening to the Keep the Weight Off podcast with Dr. Angela, episode number 19.
Welcome to the Keep the Weight Off podcast, where we bust all the dieting myths and discover not just how to lose weight, but more importantly, how to keep it off. We go way beyond the food, and we use science and psychology to give you strategies that work. And now your host, Dr. Angela Zechmann.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Marshall is back with us this week. Say hi, Marshall.
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
She has had a lot going on. Her son just graduated from high school, and so there's been lots going on in her life, and she just couldn't be there for the recording last week, but I am super glad that you're back with us. This week, I wanted to talk about habits because in the Journey Beyond Weight Loss course, we are in Module 3, which is all about habits. And so I thought that I would give our podcast listeners a little mini lesson in habits because they're really, really important in our weight loss journey. So it's interesting because, the first question you might want to ask is, well, what exactly is a habit? And so I looked it up on dictionary.com, best place ever, right? And they said that it is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Now, I think they might have been thinking about like drug habits when they were thinking about that.
Although I'm really good at making bad habits.
Like the sugar habit, the flour habit, all that.
Exactly.
The alcohol habit.
Exactly.
Right. So, but, there's brain chemistry behind this, so I want to explain that. Aristotle said we are the sum of our actions, and therefore our habits make all the difference. And then there's the famous Benjamin Franklin quote, he said, early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So, I know, isn't that interesting? So our habits they're sort of like the sum total of our actions over, the course of days and weeks and years. And we can make some amazing shifts if we just sort of change these little things that we're doing on a daily basis. And that's why I spent an entire module focusing on this in Journey Beyond Weight Loss. And as a matter of fact, I could do like a whole 4 to 6 week mini course on habits. So there's just a lot to know and a lot to understand. We can have habits that really serve us, like Benjamin Franklin's habits really served him. And we can have habits that will thwart us every single time. And it's important to kind of figure out the difference. And so that's why I want to talk about this week. It's interesting because we didn't really know too much about the brain until the 1990s. They really started to developing a lot of neuroscience research on the brain in the 1990s. And they were beginning to understand more about how habits get formed. And it turns out that there's this very specific part of the brain called the basal ganglia, and it manages our automatic behaviors for us. So you want to kind of think about this from an evolutionary perspective. As we were evolving as people, we had to keep an eye out for danger. And so that was the only way we were going to survive, is if we were ready for anything dangerous that was going to kill us and eat us, right? And so anything that we could do that was routine and mundane, that we didn't have to think about, our brain was going to figure out a way to make it easy for us so that we could keep our eyes open for danger. That's what's going on. That's what the basal ganglia does for us. The repetition of these sort of behaviors that we do every single day will get stored in the basal ganglia, so it's all unconscious and we don't have to think about it. So I always give the example, think about what you do when you get into a car to drive. There's this whole routine that you go into, and it's all automatic. So in the beginning, think about when you were first learning how to drive. There's no way it could be automatic. You had to think about every piece of it. Like, where does the key go? How do you adjust the seats properly? How do you start the car? How do you put it in gear? How do you back up? Where's the brake? Where's the accelerator? How do you change lanes? That all has to be learned, and it all takes time. But once you learn it, all these little movements become automatic. All you got to do is get into your car and go. And I don't know about you, Marshall, but many, many times I have gone from one place to another. I have changed lanes on the highway, no recollection of any of it. I might have been listening to a book on tape or listening to a podcast or talking to somebody in the car, and everything just happens automatically. And so that's how our brains work. Like these things that we do on a routine, regular basis. Think about when you go get into the shower. Do you think about every time you pick the soap up and how you wash your hair and all that stuff? You don't think about any of that. You just do it. And so that is what the basal ganglia is doing for us. It is managing all of this stuff sort of unconsciously, so we don't have to use any brain energy to think about it. Okay? Does that make sense?
I think like nowadays, a lot of people call that muscle memory.
Well, yeah.
Is that the same thing?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, although
doing stuff automatically after a while.
Yeah, in terms of the things that you do physically, yeah, I would call that muscle memory. Okay, I think that's a good analogy.
Different than habits. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, there are habits of thought as well, and then habits of things that you do. So, the interesting thing about habits, though, is the brain does have to be active during two phases of it. So there are actually 3 steps to a habit, to the formation of a habit. And this is all documented perfectly in a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And I'm going to put that information in the show notes for you so that you guys, if you want to download the book or whatever, you can easily find it. So what happens is that there is a cue. So there'll be some sort of environmental trigger, some sort of cue. So for example, in order to get my car driving habit going, I have to actually see my car and get into my car. And then that starts the whole process. But after that, the basal ganglia will take over. And then, so what the basal ganglia is doing, that whole car driving routine, is called the routine. So you have your cue, and then you have your routine. And then the habit has to be sealed in place by some sort of reward. So in the case of driving a car, the reward is getting to your destination. In the case of taking a shower, the reward is feeling clean and refreshed. In the case of brushing your teeth, the reward is having clean teeth and that wonderful, clean breath taste in your mouth. In the case of making your bed, your reward is, a nicely made bed and a sense of order. So all of these routines, these habits, have a loop where there's a cue, and then there's a routine, and then there's a reward during the end of it. And the brain has to be active during the cue phase and during the reward phase, but the routine piece of it is completely unconscious.
Oh, I have an example of this, I think.
Okay.
So I was having a really hard time getting water in, and I was feeling really dehydrated, especially at work. So what I did is I got like a little mason jar that I like to drink, my drinks out of. And I set it next to the sink. And then anytime that I happened to go into the kitchen, I would see that glass sitting there, and it would remind me to drink water.
Oh, good. Okay.
I would do it. And I got into the habit of doing it every morning.
That's
whenever
perfect.
I went into the kitchen.
Yeah. So you get into the kitchen. Your cue is seeing the mason jar. The routine is you just fill it up and drink the water. And then what's the reward?
Being hydrated.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So perfect. That's awesome. So you can use this to your advantage in weight loss too. So my recommendation is to start with your eating habits. So most people are creatures of habit when it comes to their food. So what I would recommend that you do, and this is for our podcast listeners, is to figure out what habits you have right now. Like, what are your habits? Because remember, most of it is unconscious. So you think about, okay, breakfast. What do you eat for breakfast? Do you even eat breakfast? What is your routine when it comes to eating breakfast? And then, do you have any morning snacks? And then, what about lunch? Do you eat lunch? Do you miss lunch? Do you work through lunch? Do you snack in the afternoon? Do you stop by someplace on your way home from work? Do you routinely go through a drive-through? Um, do you plan your meals ahead? Do you walk in the front door and the first thing is to, automatically go get a glass of wine? A lot of people do that. What about in the evening times? For some people, once they have the kids put to bed, they go turn the TV on and they pop some popcorn or get a bag of chips in front of the TV. Or crawling into bed can be a cue if you have the TV on at night. Sometimes crawling into bed and eating in bed is a habit. So there are all of these different habits that we have with our eating. And then you also kind of want to notice if you have different routines on the weekends. And so this is why I recommend doing a whole week's worth of sort of tracking what your current habits are. And this is not because you want to be beating yourself up or anything. You just kind of want to find out, like, what's going on right now and what of it is serving me and what of it is not serving me. So on the weekends, maybe, you sleep in on the weekends. And so your Saturday and Sunday routines are totally different. And so maybe you're sleeping in and skipping breakfast on those days. And things are opening up, at least in our areas of the country. Maybe you're starting to get back into restaurant routines, that sort of thing, restaurant habits. So, the Friday night girls' night out or pizza and beer, whatever it might be. So there's just a lot of sort of routines that you have around food. And that's what you want to sort of think about and tease out. Because the best part of this is that you can really tap into the power of your basal ganglia. Because remember, it's all unconscious. So once you have a good awareness of what your automatic routines are like now, you can make a decision as to whether or not you want to keep these routines or whether or not you want to train your brain into a new routine. And remember, it's going to take a little time and energy in the beginning to get your brain set on a new routine. But once you get the new routine set, your basal ganglia will take over and then you don't have to think about it. And you can design your routines and you can design your rewards so that they serve you in your weight loss efforts. And so that's what I call weight loss on autopilot, right? So Marshall, you've been doing that. You've lost 60 pounds and kept it off over the last 3 years. And I'm just curious to know, like, what sorts of routines have you developed that were different from what you were doing before? And what kinds of struggles have you had?
Well, it's so hard for me to go back and think, just because it's been a while now. So it's hard because my basal ganglia has taken over in a lot of cases, and it just seems like I'm doing some things automatically, and it's hard for me to remember. I think, though, that one thing I'm getting out of what you're saying is that, at first, it takes like a deliberate action.
It does.
And not to give up because it does get easier.
Exactly. Yes.
And this is true. This was true for me. One of the things I could, as we were talking about breakfasts, I used to skip breakfast. And a lot of times I used to skip lunch too, because I was drinking coffee all day long. And
with the creamer, don't forget.
yeah. Basically, I was drinking creamer with some coffee in it.
Exactly.
So I, at first, so what I did was I made these frittatas, these egg frittatas that the doctor gave me a recipe for. And I would make on Sunday, I would make up a whole week's worth.
Yeah.
And so that was the conscious effort that I put into it, was like prepping, going to the store and buying the stuff and making it up. It only took 1 hour to prep everything for the whole week. And then every morning when I would be rushing, I wouldn't have to really think about what I was going to have. It was just there in the fridge, and I would just go and grab one. And, I'd be able to either pop it in the microwave at home or at work, but I had it, and it got easier for me to do that,
Mm-hmm.
as time went on,
Mm-hmm.
because breakfast was really hard for me. I never really cared about breakfast. I still have a
Mm-hmm.
hard time with breakfast. I'm not going to lie. I mean, if that's the first thing, I know that I'm getting off of my routine when I start skipping breakfast. That's the first thing, the telltale sign.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Interesting.
because it's just always been a problem for me.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, but that's the first thing, that's the first thing to go when
Mhm.
my routine gets off, or I have stuff going on in life. Like right now, I'm really struggling just because, my son just graduated from high school. And of course, all the, the preparation and that, goes into that. And then, we had a big party. So we had people coming, from all over the place. And I sort of like
Mm.
in one weekend, things went south.
Yeah.
And and I could have like beat myself up for it. And, like what I used to do, I would just be so hard on myself and I'd feel like a total failure. But I'm just I allowed myself permission to splurge. And I
Hmm.
knew it was going to happen because we had this beautiful cake made for his graduation.
I saw
And
pictures on Facebook. I was like,
I
wow.
know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was amazing. So I knew, I knew those temptations were going to be there. But so, come tomorrow, though, I also know that it's time for me to get back on track. I did, it was a weekend of pretty much doing whatever I wanted. And
Hmm.
then, now I'm getting back on track, and I'm not going to beat myself up for it. I'm just going to move on to the, like I always say, the next right meal. And
Hmm.
tonight we did. Tonight my husband and I, we made steak, and
Hmm.
vegetables, and now we're
Yeah.
getting back on track, and
Awesome.
the party's cleaned up, and we're moving on back into our normal routine,
So
and
I
it's
think this is
easier.
huge. I think this is huge, Marshall, because what you're saying is the new habits are normal for you, and this was an anomaly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
huge.
I guess that is what I'm saying. I didn't really think
Yeah.
about it like that. And it was a
Yeah.
lot easier for us to just get like right back on track because because it's become more normal. Wow, that's kind of cool. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah. Your brain wants to go back to what is now normal for it, and normal for
Yeah,
it is
so
a
like
good,
the
nourishing meal plan. That is
yeah, like the
awesome.
party behavior was not normal, which it
Yeah.
used to be. I mean, that's just used to be like chips and drive-throughs and and all that kind of stuff used to be normal. But no, I mean, it was easier because I had also what I did was knowing that this was going to happen. When I was at the grocery store, buying stuff for the party, I also bought, like my meat and vegetables to get back on track the next week.
Hmm.
So it was
Yeah.
easy for me to just go to the freezer, take it out, and just start back the way that I used to, eat. Oh, last weekend or last week, or
Hmm. Yeah.
maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it's been a couple of weeks now. I don't know. I kind of lost track of time.
Yeah.
So now I
Yeah.
feel,
So,
now I feel okay. So that's just something that's been a struggle for me is breakfast, and I think now just it gets easier and easier as you
mhm.
practice.
Exactly. Yeah. That is so cool. Very cool. Nice job, Marshall.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
I didn't even prepare that.
Ah. We've had patients who talk about, like this one gal, I remember her really specifically because she said that she had just retired. And now that she had retired, she would stay up late. It turns out her natural biorhythms are to stay up until 1 or 2 in the morning and to get up around 8 or 9. But her husband was still working. And so her husband was going to bed earlier and getting up earlier. And so she had all this time after he went to bed. And so that would be her cue. This is what she told me. When my husband goes to bed, this is my cue to turn on the TV and start eating. And so I told her about habits and how our brains work. And so what she did is she designed herself a new habit because she realized that the cue for her was the TV being turned on. And so she decided, well, there's not all that interesting on TV anyway. I'm just going to read a book instead. And so she read a book and she got herself some herbal tea, I think, instead. And she'd just stay up reading. And then she'd go to bed at 12 or 1 or whatever time made sense to her. And that was a whole new, it was just as enjoyable for her. I mean, she still had this nice sort of reward at the end of it all of relaxation time for herself. But she didn't have the negative consequences of all of that weight gain from the TV and eating. So there are ways to do this if you figure out what the cue is and figure out what your routine is, and you can either shift your routine, you can get rid of the cue, you can change the reward a little bit so that there's a new way of doing the habit, right? So that you can completely change your life this way. You really can. It's super, super fun. But I do have some little guidelines or secrets. If you decide that you want to start a new habit, here is what I have 3 little secrets here for you. The first thing I want you to understand is that it's going to take time for the basal ganglia to be able to record and remember your new behaviors. So imagine how much time it took you to learn to drive a car. It was like 3 to 6 months probably. And so you have to be really patient with yourself when you're learning these new habits. So I would say 3 to 6 months of pretty consistent routine, and your basal ganglia, it should just get easier and easier for you all the time. In the beginning, you have to think about every little movement and every piece of the routine, but it just gets easier and easier over time. And I would think that surely by 9 months, it should be a pretty well ingrained habit. And that's the way it is for you. You started, Marshall, your sugar detox. It's been over a year now. And so your new nutrition habits are pretty well established. And so to you, having a splurge weekend is weird and you're ready to get back to your normal habits. I think
this is true. Yes.
I think that's really cool. The second thing that I want our podcast listeners to know is that when you're in the process of developing a new habit, remember that your brain is always trying to conserve energy. And if something really, really stressful happens, like last year when the pandemic hit, we had a whole bunch of people who were starting new habits, and then the pandemic hit, and the brain went into shock. Everybody's brain was in shock. And so they weren't able to continue that. And they felt badly about it. And I'm like, hey, that's called normal brain behavior. When something shocking happens to you, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's your mother falling and breaking her hip, whether it's somebody going off on maternity leave at work and you end up having to pick up a whole bunch of extra work hours, whatever it might be, when your brain is under stress, it's going to take the easy way out, which means no new habits are going to be, it's not going to be working on any new habits. Okay? So you're going to go back to the old habits. And I want you to think about habits in terms of like, compare it to a highway. Like habits that you've had for decades and decades are like a 5-lane highway where everybody's going 80 miles an hour. Like this is well-worn, well-established. And new habits are kind of like a country road through a wheat field, and you're just sort of knocking down some wheat and trying to make a path through it. So that's why it feels harder, and so if you run into a stressful situation while you're in the process of knocking down wheat so you can make a path through the wheat field, your brain is going to be, hey, we're doing this 5-lane highway. Like, we're not going to be wasting our time with this new stuff. So just be aware of that. Anytime that you're trying to develop a new habit, if you end up in a stressful situation and you go back in your old habits, that's called normal brain behavior. That doesn't mean stop doing what you're doing. It just means start over again when you are through the stressful situation. Don't ever give up. Okay. All right. And then the next thing that I want you to know is that it can oftentimes help to start very, very small with a new habit. So there's a guy named BJ Fogg who is a researcher at Stanford, and he is director of the Behavior Design Lab there. So think about the terminology, behavior design. We're going to design new behaviors. That's what he helps people do. And he has an awesome TED Talk. We'll put a link to his TED Talk up in the show notes as well. And he's an advocate of starting with very, very small changes and then using your brain's natural capacity for reward to seal in the new small behavior. So in his TED Talk, he talks about, somebody wants to establish the habit of flossing their teeth. And so he recommends to start with just one tooth. Just floss one tooth. And he recommends that after you're done flossing your one tooth, that you reward yourself with that very audible, meaning out loud, great job, or you're awesome, so that you end up secreting some reward chemicals in your brain, because the brain likes that. So you floss your one tooth, you go through the behavior, and then you say, you're awesome, or great job, or whatever it is that is your way of celebrating. And then the next time you do that for a few days, and then you floss 2 teeth. And then you floss 3 teeth. And then after a while, you're flossing your whole mouth, and the behavior has been rewarded over and over and over again, so it's just easy to do it. And so we've had students in Journey Beyond Weight Loss do this. They've made all kinds of small incremental changes, and they just kept working at them. I'm thinking of one gal in particular. She said she wanted to start exercising, and she decided to start small. And so she just went outside and she had some steps in her front path, and she just went up and down the steps once. And then she'd give herself a woohoo or you're awesome. And she just kept doing that. And then she built up. And now she's a regular gym goer. So you can start very, very slowly with these new habits and just design them into your life. So this is why I say, we could do a whole 4 to 6 week immersion on something like this, and just really think through, what are your habits? What kinds of habits do you want to develop? What kinds of habits do you want to let go of? And it's not just about food and exercise. There are all kinds of habits that you can develop that will support you in your weight loss journey. I talked about meditation last week. Your sleep habits are super important. I'll do a podcast on that soon. There's just so much to think about when it comes to your weight loss journey. And I don't want anyone to think that any of this can be easy once you start working with your brain, right? So I've just been giving you a taste of all of this on this podcast. We do a whole lot more in Journey Beyond Weight Loss. And I will give you 3 resources to check out. The first is the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. The second is a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. And I believe he's got a blog too. And you could just join his blog and get notifications. And then BJ Fogg's book called Tiny Habits. And I would definitely watch his TED Talk because it's great and it's really entertaining as well. These guys are just all really brilliant thinkers on this subject, and what they have to teach will help you in all areas of your life, not just in weight loss. And I would recommend that you do the little exercise I suggested too, just to bring awareness to what your current habits are, what your current eating habits are. And you can look at all of your other habits too, but I would start with your eating habits because they're the most important. And think about what you might want to shift and how you might want to do it. And leave me a comment at journeybeyondweightloss.com/blog, or on iTunes. You can comment there, or you can comment on YouTube as well at Dr. Angela Zechmann on YouTube. And just let me know what it is that you discovered and what kind of shifts you might want to make. Marshall, did you have any other comments at all, or any questions at all?
No, I was just thinking about how much Journey Beyond Weight Loss has helped me. So if you guys are interested in actually doing some deeper work, then you got to get in on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is just kind of a taste of what you do
Yeah.
in Journey Beyond Weight Loss, and there's a lot
Yeah.
more to learn.
There is. There is. So, all right, great. So, thanks for listening, all of you who are our podcast listeners. Make sure that you've subscribed and make sure to leave ratings and reviews and comments. We love reading all of that. And we will see you all next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, if you really want to lose weight and keep it off for good, your next step is to sign up for Dr. Angela's free weight loss course, where you're going to learn everything you need to get started on your weight loss journey the right way. Just head over to journeybeyondweightloss.com/free course to sign up. Also, it would be awesome if you could take a few moments and write a review on iTunes. Thanks, and we'll see you in Journey Beyond Weight Loss.